Jack Thunder and the Fragments of Anima, Book 6, Light. Chapter 1, The Sun Rises. The sun peeked out just above the horizon, bringing scant rays of light to the dark and rainy land known as Tempest Island. Not many people would be up at this hour, but a certain reef siren watched the sun slowly rise from the window to Jack Thunder's room. The storm gremlin and his pet wyvern slept just feet away, undisturbed. Buckthorn turned her glance down to the book she was reading. The storm gremlin had brought it up here from their last adventure. She stared down at the spell written out on the page. Heaven's Transformation. So this is what Jack was talking about. He had been blathering non-stop about it. Something about a spell that could save Alterus forever. She had doubted it at first, but looking at the spell now, she realized he was right. Heaven's Transformation had the power to redeem wendigoes, transforming them into fenghuangs, beings of pure anima who protected Alterus and his people. But there was a catch. A few, actually. For one, they would need all the fragments of anima at their disposal. Right now, they had only 5. They had still yet to find the fragment of light. Light. Buckthorn noticed the first sunbeams of the day streaming through Jack Thunder's window. She turned again to the window. Clouds dyed in shades of violet and pink meeting her eye. Even through the endless clouds of Tempest Island, the spring sun shone brightly. Instead of snow, a light rain sprinkled from Tempest Island's clouds. The grass peeked out through the remaining snowbanks, and the trees had sprouted tiny spear-shaped leaf buds. The reef siren sighed. Such a relief. She had spent nearly all of this journey freezing her scales off. The elder goat's winter coat made the weather a bit more tolerable, but it would be such a relief not to have to wear it anymore for at least another year. Just then, Buckthorn heard the rustling of sheets behind her. She turned to look back at Jack Thunder, who was now sitting up in bed. Razor had also awoken, his head turned straight at her. "Hey, you're up early. What you reading?" Buckthorn turned the book so that he could see the page. "You were right. About the spell, I mean." He turned his glance down towards the page. He immediately recognized it. "I figured I'd better bring it along. I want to try it if we get the chance." He paused as his face fell. "I'm a bit worried about it not working, though." Buckthorn knew what he was talking about. "Snotter?" she asked in a voice barely above a whisper. Jack Thunder nodded. "That, and none of us have actually seen the Heart of Darkness. All we saw was that Nemesis thing. You remember how Nemesis was when we defeated it last time?" Jack Thunder couldn't possibly forget. Nemesis hadn't fought back at all. It just sat there and took it when the 5 of them banished it back to the flip side. He remembered how doggedly Nemesis resisted banishment when he, Buckthorn, and Shadowpaws first met it at the Dark Carnival. What had changed inside the Wendigo General in the past few months? All of a sudden, Jack Thunder understood. If Nemesis had changed its tune that fast, who was to say that the Heart of Darkness wasn't also faltering? That would make his job so much easier. He relaxed, leaning back and turning his gaze up to the window. He chuckled. "I've been thinking, isn't it kind of funny that we found Lethal Joke around the time when winter was starting, and now we're looking for Excalibur right as it's about to end?" Buckthorn nodded. She didn't really find it funny, but it was more than appropriate. They sat in silence for a few moments before a sudden buzzing caught their attention. Jack Thunder and Buckthorn turned their heads towards the source of the noise. There in the corner sat Stormbringer and the Sea Stone, pulsing with waves of golden yellow light. "Are you sure that's what it was?" Shadowpaws swallowed another mouthful of scrambled eggs. "What else could it be?" Jack Thunder answered. He pointed to the fragments of anima. "Look, they're flashing right now." Sure enough, the fragments were all glowing the same golden color beside the young heroes. Stormbringer, the Sea Stone, Lethal Joke, Terra, and Yuuki had all traded their elemental hues for the color of the light element. Shadowpaw sighed to himself. Barely even 2 months since he nearly got all his fur singed off, and now they had another adventure on their hands. And it would only get more difficult when they had all the fragments. Then they would actually have to face the Heart of Darkness. He rubbed his temples. He didn't want to think about that right now. All of a sudden, a familiar birdman burst through the front door. San swooped inside before making his landing on the kitchen tile. By his heavy breathing, it sounded like he'd been flying outside for a while. It seems that we're on the course for the Forest of the Young, he panted. Excalibur is in the Forest of the Young? Kirami inquired. She remembered traveling through the glorious woodland with Alteria during their travels, but she hadn't sensed any sign of the light fragment. Then again, they didn't have any of the other fragments of anima with them either. It would seem so. I didn't see it down there, but... Oh, come on! Snotter shouted. We need to go right away. Who knows if that Nemesis freak is already down there? Kirami nodded in agreement. That Wendigo must be getting pretty desperate by now. But what about the Grotto of the Young? Buckthorn jumped in. What about it? Snotter was getting more impatient every second. There might still be some residual magic around the grotto. How do we know it isn't just that? Snotter snorted. So what? We just sit here and do nothing until we know for sure? We don't have time for that. Buckthorn admitted to herself that Snotter had a point, but the fairy snail's attitude was really getting to her. She looked around and spotted Shadowpaw's. You agree with me, don't you? Shadowpaw's froze, perturbed. Hold on. The 5 heroes snapped to attention. San had been the one to interrupt. The Fragments of Anima have never steered us wrong thus far. Why would they now? But what about... Buckthorn stammered. San shook his head. When we first got captured back in the Dark Carnival, we didn't realize it wasn't the dark fragment Stormbringer was sensing until it was too late. That was our fault, not the fragments. He turned to Snotter. The fragments guided us to the Emerald Woodland when we were looking for Terra. Do you remember where you found it? Snotter recalled telling San where they'd found the fragment of Earth. It was underneath Yggdrasil. Correct. I'm thinking that Excalibur might be somewhere under the ground like Terra was. San turned back to Buckthorn. I understand your point. The Grotto of the Young is a place with strong light magic. But Snotter and Kirami are right. Nemesis and the other Wendigos are going to be pulling out all stops on this one. Even if we don't find Excalibur, we can at least find some clues as to where it is. Buckthorn nodded slowly. That made sense. All right then. Jack Thunder clapped his hands together. When do we leave? Chapter 2. The Grotto of the Young. Within the dark corners of a brilliant spring forest, a being with a goat skull for a head stirred. Nemesis hid just outside the Grotto of the Young. This was as close as it could get. The light magic inside was too powerful. But even from this distance, it could sense that Excalibur was somewhere in there. What seemed like hours passed as Nemesis waited for the heroes to arrive. Was there really no one else at this grotto? The Wendigo remembered how vibrant the Grotto of the Young had once been. This was the place where Puer Aeternus was created and raised. Their presence instilled an eternal spring in the Forest of the Young. No matter the time of year, the forest was blessed with pleasant weather, colorful blossoms, and gorgeous greenery, all because of Puer Aeternus. But when the youth demigod left, that had all changed. Without its patron guardian, the forest's perennial spring had abated. Now it went through the same seasons as the rest of Alterus. Not that one could tell by how it was now. Around the vernal equinox, it appeared just as fresh and vibrant as it did back in its glory days. Nemesis's thoughts were interrupted when it heard a rustling sound in the trees behind it. When it turned around, it couldn't see anything. All of a sudden, someone dropped from the tree. Someone with soft, fuzzy ears and 2 feathered wings. The figure stood up and dusted themselves off before making their way into the grotto. Nemesis watched the stranger's head dart about, as if they were looking for something. Who was this person? And why were they here? San sighed to himself. Well, here we go again. Without hesitation, he leapt onto the rainbow slide and made the long and steep descent to the surface. He wished that Jack Thunder would have asked Terry Paradise to give them a ride again, but he wasn't going to make a fuss. He shut his eyes tight as he felt the ground met his feet. Opening them, he saw that he was standing upright in the midst of a bright woodland bursting with spring blossoms. After all this time, he'd finally done it. He'd managed to make a smooth landing on the rainbow slide. San stepped away just as Razor made his way down, followed by Jack Thunder, Buckthorn, Kirami, and the others. As soon as Frosty landed on the grass, the rainbow dissipated, fading into nothingness. They took a look around. It was still morning in the Forest of the Young. The sun's rays cascaded through the branches above their heads. A cool breeze wafted around them, shaking the jade leaves on the trees. At their feet fluttered butterflies with wings like gemstones, swarming around the daffodils that grew in clusters all around them. Still, a light dusting of snow covered the ground, left over from the winter season. San could hear songbirds chirping and a stream trickling somewhere in the distance. Jack Thunder took the lead. He swung Stormbringer around, getting a sense of where they were. Finding a lead to the south, he motioned for the rest of the team to follow. They made their way through the wondrous woodland, towards the Grotto of the Young. Hey, Buckthorn? What was San talking about earlier? About the Dark Carnival? Buckthorn glanced over to Snotter. She shook her head. You weren't there when it happened. We had gone to the nursery rhyme district for the Dark Carnival. Strombolio tried to help us find Lethal Joke, and we thought Jack had picked up on it. Turns out it had actually sensed wendigos in the direction we were going, but we didn't realize that at the time. She sighed. I should have known better. Strombolio? Wasn't he there with us on the winter solstice? Yeah, he was. He seemed to be doing a lot better, too. He was? Snotter cocked her head, confused. He wasn't doing so well when we first met him. After we defeated Nemesis, he sat down with us and started drinking from this huge bottle of cider. San got pretty upset with him. They went into another part of the woods to talk, and Strombolio looked pretty shook up when they came back. Snotter thought for a minute. She remembered how Strombolio had said something about how being in Yggdrasil's grove during the winter solstice celebration would tempt him. Wow! There! I see it! Right up ahead! Kirami shouted suddenly. The two of them looked up. Right in front of them was an ornate marble arch. Creeping vines wrapped around every part of it, but they could still make out the symbol of a sun with a flower in the center. The symbol of the cult of youth. They had found it. As the team made their way inside, though, they noticed the sorry state of the grotto. Snotter could imagine that, at one point, this was the most beautiful place in all of Alterus. Now it was overgrown, littered with crumbled stone and broken glass. Most of the buildings were missing their roofs, and even those that weren't looked like they were about to collapse under their own weight. Still, if the fragments had led them here, that meant Excalibur was somewhere nearby. Jack Thunder traced the broken, mossy stone pathways while the rest of the team followed. Stormbringer's pulse didn't change as he made his way to the other end of the grotto, then back around the perimeter back to the front gate. Had he lost his lead? Jack Thunder looked over at Stormbringer. No, it was still yellow. So were the other fragments. They had just reached a dead end. San was right. Excalibur wasn't anywhere up here. It had to be underground somewhere. But where was the way in? Jack Thunder entered the skeletal temple in the center of the grotto. He didn't see any entrance, just a deserted podium and 2 rows of long crumbling statues. Nothing here. He was about to leave when he heard Shadowpaw's voice. Guys? I don't think we're alone. Jack Thunder and the others turned to where Shadowpaws was looking. Sure enough, someone from outside was staring back at the crew. They looked a lot like a high elf, with golden hair and pointed ears, but they were wearing only rags, and their skin was covered in mud smears and various scrapes. They glared back at the crew with eyes the color of ice water. None of them would have ever guessed it, but San recognized the stranger. Is that? Chapter 3. A New Feathered Friend. "What do you think you're doing in there?" the stranger yelled, running up to the window. "This is the Temple of the Young. It's not open to anyone except the priests." "Puer Aeternus!" San shouted back. "You've been living here all this time?" Puer Aeternus didn't answer. Instead, they jumped through the window beside them and began hastily sweeping up some broken glass. "Don't you people care anything for protocol? What'll happen if the priest finds out, huh? Do you want to get in trouble?" Their eyes darted back and forth. San ran over to the light elemental, grabbing their face and turning it to face his own. "It's me. Don't you remember?" That seemed to jog Puer Aeternus' memory. "San? There you are. What have you been doing here?" Puer Aeternus turned their attention back to the broken glass. "I've been here since the end of the war. Someone had to watch over this place, you know?" "But why?" Kirami asked. "There are plenty of other towns around here that I'm sure need your help." Puer Aeternus dodged the question. "This grove has been here since I have. Thousands of years, in fact. At first, it was just a circle of us hanging out in the middle of the forest. Just a little sunny spot in the middle of the forest. Then came the buildings." Puer Aeternus paused for breath. "They weren't much at first, but they became something really special. I didn't really like that they built this temple at first. I mean, what's the point? It just blocks out the sun. But eventually I came to love it. Just all of us in the middle of paradise." They began to hastily scoop up the rocky debris on the floor, trying to stick it back onto one of the statues. It didn't stay. "But what's the point of staying if there's no one around to enjoy it anymore?" Snotter barked. Puer Aeternus froze. The young heroes' stomachs all dropped at the same time. Tears filled Puer Aeternus' eyes, and before Snotter or the others could say anything more, the Light Champion bolted out the front door, sobbing uncontrollably. "What? What did I say?" Snotter shouted incredulously. San shook his head. "Puer Aeternus isn't quite right in the head. I think they don't want to accept that the Cult of Youth is gone, so they hold up here, maintaining this place the best they can." He paused. "I'm sure it would make them feel better if we just explain ourselves. They'll be more than happy to help once they learn why we're here." "I'll go with you," Jack Thunder offered. Razor chirped in agreement. "So will I," Buckthorn seconded. "I think Puer Aeternus really needs some help. And I'd better come along too." Kirami turned to Snotter. "You and Shadowpaws keep looking for Excalibur. I don't trust you to talk to Puer Aeternus. You'll just make them cry again." Snotter balked. "Excuse me? Just because I asked the obvious question?" "Snotter," Shadowpaws interrupted. "She's right. Let's just go. Maybe we can find a way underground ourselves." Snotter huffed to herself but nodded. While the others made their way towards where Puer Aeternus had gone, Snotter and Shadowpaws continued to search the grotto for any way into the underground they could find. "Ugh, we've been circling this place for hours and still nothing." Shadowpaws rolled his eyes. He was pretty sure they hadn't been walking for hours, but it definitely felt as such to the fairy snail. That or she was just upset that Kirami had told her off. Probably both. Shadowpaws heard leaves rustling above him. Turning his gaze upward, he caught sight of a silhouette in the trees. At first, he thought it might have been a bird. It had feathered wings and a large beak. But more and more it changed to look like San before his eyes. The figure popped its head out of the veil of leaves it hid itself in. Shadowpaws spotted a being with ash-gray feathers and golden skin. A Valkyrie. He wore a pair of heavy-looking goggles on his head. The stranger popped his arm out from his hiding spot. In his hand was a rather fancy-looking camera. He held it up to his face and began snapping pictures with it. It was a few minutes before he looked down and spotted the two on the ground. He flared out his wings a bit in surprise. He removed something from his ears before shouting down to the two of them. "Sorry, I didn't hear you coming. I had my earbuds in. What brings you here?" Snotter jumped, brandishing her axe. Shadowpaws stepped forward. He held Lethal Joke in both of his paws, showing the stranger he had no harmful intentions. "We came here because we sensed Excalibur was around here somewhere. Do you know anything about it?" "Excalibur?" The stranger slid down the tree, meeting his indigo eyes with Shadowpaws' own. "Wow, I came here because I heard this place harbors great treasure, but I didn't think that Excalibur would be here too." Snotter scowled. "Who are you, some kind of thief?" "Snotter!" Shadowpaws gave her a sharp nudge. No, don't worry, it's fine. I see why you think that. My name is Saturn. I'm part of the League of Exploration. They sent me over here to survey the Grotto of the Young and see if there are any artifacts I can recover. They wanted them for a museum exhibit, I think they said. His face fell. I didn't know there were still people living here. Survey? Shadowpaws asked. So you know this place? Have you seen anything that looks like it might lead to an underground tunnel? An underground tunnel? No, nothing like that. I could try and look for one, but it could take a while. But you have wings, don't you? So why not just fly over and look? Snotter interjected. Saturn flinched a little. Well, I would, but you see, I can't. What do you mean you can't? That's when the two noticed Saturn's left wing. It was terribly withered, crooked, and sticking out at an odd angle. It hung uselessly from his back. I broke it, he answered. I went into an old temple and tripped one of the traps. Couldn't get to a healer in time either, so it's bent out of shape. Shadowpaws nodded. No wonder Saturn couldn't fly. Snotter, however, was not so understanding. She had let out a long sigh of exasperation before kicking the side of the tree Saturn was just perched on. All of a sudden, a deep rumble shook the ground as a doorway opened in the tree's trunk, revealing a secret passage. Saturn stared in awe. Wow, I didn't even know this was here. Without hesitation, Snotter dove headfirst into the passageway. Shadowpaws followed close behind, a worried expression plastered on his face. Hey, wait for me! Just before the passageway closed, Saturn dove straight in. He made his way into the underground depths. Chapter 4 Sword in the Stone. Puer Aeternus sniffled, staring into the water below. They knew that the cult of youth was gone, but why did that snail have to bring it up like that? It was already difficult enough coming back after the war to an empty grotto. At least by caring for it, Puer Aeternus could ensure that its legacy wasn't forgotten. They were so wrapped up in their own thoughts, they didn't notice the shadowy cloud looming above them, reddened eyes staring down at them. Nemesis smelled the sorrow coming off of Puer Aeternus. About 3 failures ago, it would have laughed to see the champion of light broken down and miserable like this. But it had no interest in tormenting the youth demigod. It just needed information. Nemesis latched onto Puer Aeternus' mind. It sifted through memories, seeing Puer Aeternus' life in the grotto as well as their time in the war, searching for anything about the light fragment Excalibur. Eventually, it came across one. Nemesis couldn't believe it. Excalibur was in these very tunnels. Fast as light, it made its way to the chamber where Excalibur sat. The room was entirely dark save for a shaft of light beaming down from above. It fell on a familiar silver and gold sword with the cyan gemstone in the center, sticking up out of a small boulder. Nemesis sighed and rubbed its ethereal hands together. This was not going to be easy. Pulling upwards, the former Wendigo general tried to loosen the light fragment from its place, but Excalibur did not budge. The longer Nemesis held onto the sword, the worse the pain got. It was like the sword was burning a scar into the Wendigo's hands. Eventually, the pain became too much. The sword slipped from Nemesis's grasp, causing the Wendigo to crash into the ceiling. It was no use. Nemesis just could not dislodge the thing. Nemesis heard a commotion coming from one of the tunnels. Jack Thunder and his friends had arrived. It fled into the opposite tunnel. Maybe they could loosen Excalibur, at least a little bit. Kirami couldn't believe her eyes. Excalibur sat right in front of them, unguarded and gleaming in the sunlight. "Wow, that was easy," Jack Thunder proclaimed to her right. "Looks like we just gotta get it out of here." He tugged on the sword, but it wouldn't budge. Kirami looked down at the sword's base. The blade stuck out of a narrow crack in a massive gray stone. No wonder Jack was having trouble. "Here, let me try." She sheathed the Yuuki, grabbing Excalibur with both hands. She had no luck either. No matter how hard she strained, she just couldn't extract the sword from its place. Buckthorn, Frosty, Sun, and even Razor each tried their hand. They had about just as much luck. Finally, they had decided to all hold on to Excalibur at the same time and pull. Still, the broadsword didn't move an inch. Kirami sighed and wiped her brow. It's really stuck." "Well, that's just great," Jack Thunder huffed. "How are we supposed to beat the Heart of Darkness if we can't even get Excalibur because it's stuck in a rock?" "Yeah, I know. Not even all of us together could take it out," Buckthorn panted. "Maybe Excalibur needs someone special to extract it?" Kirami suggested. "Like one of the fragment wielders?" Jack Thunder resisted, rolling his eyes. "But if Mr. San couldn't do it, who could?" San interjected. "Kirami has a point. Excalibur might need the Light Champion to remove it from its place. When we go see Puer Aeternus, we'll ask them if they can handle it. For now we have no choice but to leave it." "But what about the wendigos?" "I'll watch it," Frosty offered. "At least until Snotter and Shadowpaws get down here. I'll catch up with you later." Jack Thunder, Buckthorn, and Kirami exchanged looks, but they really had nothing to say. They would be back in a moment. Frosty could handle herself until then, couldn't she? Reluctantly, Jack Thunder led the way out of the chamber, leaving the fragment of light and his sister behind. They disappeared into the tunnel before her eyes, the light from Stormbringer fading with distance. Kirami listened for any sign of the Nekomata and fairy snail. She heard nothing except the occasional clattering from a stone falling to the ground. A thick, musty smell filled the air. Through the dark, she could see gems of all shapes and colors sticking up from the walls. They covered every part of the chamber, the floors, the walls, even the ceiling. No wonder Puer Aeternus had been so set on guarding this place. The tunnels under the ruins were filled with treasure. "Those cultists had a lot more wealth than I thought," Frosty mused to herself. If she were to take one of those tunnels, what else would she find? Gold? Diamonds? Something more valuable, perhaps? She shook her head. What was she thinking? The wendigos were still hot on their trail. Besides, she might get lost in one of those tunnels. Who knew how long or deep they really went? So she stayed. Even when it seemed like hours had passed, she didn't dare exit the chamber. She found herself wandering in circles around Excalibur, wondering when Shadowpaws and Snotter would arrive. It seemed as though her patience paid off. She heard voices coming from one of the tunnels. Yes, those were the voices of Shadowpaws and Snotter. They'd made it. But there was someone else with them too. A voice Frosty didn't recognize. Who was that other person with them? As they got closer, Frosty could hear their conversation more clearly. So, anyway, that's how I broke my wing. Yeah, great story. Hey, what else do you think is down here? So far, I found 2 blue crystals, some gold coins, and some really cool glow fungi. Shh! Would you keep it down? You're gonna cause a cave-in. Oh, don't worry about that, Snotter. These tunnels look pretty sound to me. I've been in worse. Sounded like whoever this was, they were a real chatterbox. As Frosty pondered who this unknown person was, a number of shadowy figures rose from behind her in the black. A dozen pairs of demonic glowing eyes shone down onto Excalibur, casting it in shadow. Interlude 1. The Legend of Excalibur. The little fairy sighed, the sound carrying an exhaustion and despair much unfitting their infantile appearance. Never in 1,000 years did they dream that this would happen. Puer Aeternus was one of the Heart of Altus' first creations, a being of light magic that served as a patron of eternal youth. As such, Puer Aeternus never grew up. They blessed the forest of the young with eternal spring, eventually attracting a cabal of followers to them. There they established the Grotto of the Young, a paradise in the woods where no one ever had to grow up or be sad. Puer Aeternus had never heard of what was going on outside the grotto. The Heart of Altus had grown lazy and greedy. It had faltered on its duty to its creation, instead only favoring those whose sacrifices it held most dear. Puer Aeternus had heard tales from those outside the grotto of beings called wendigoes, creatures whose very nature of existence was to steal life from the world around them. They were scared of the tales, but they didn't think that wendigos really existed. Surely there was no such thing as a monster so miserable that its only real joy lay in destruction, was there? They should have heeded the warnings. The youth demigod looked all around at the destruction. What once was a haven of new life was now a land of desolation. Where spring once was, there was now permanent winter. All the trees were dead. All the singing birds and little animals had fled, along with the grove dwellers. Puer Aeternus wanted to crumple and cry, drowning the grotto in their tears. But they couldn't afford to indulge in such a thing now. They had too much work to do. Puer Aeternus had sat here being worshipped by these fairies for so long without really doing anything special. Just lingered on in blissful ignorance, willingly blind to what was going on outside the grotto. And now they were paying the price for it. Their followers were gone. It was past time for Puer Aeternus to prove they were worthy of their place. That's exactly what they set out to do. With great effort, they dragged a weathered broadsword to the altar where services once took place. Wrapping 2 chubby hands around the handle, Puer Aeternus did what they needed to do. As Puer Aeternus' light magic drained from them into the sword, it began to change. The blade renewed itself, turning a bright silvery white and sharpening enough to cut through stone. The handle glossed itself a bright gold, and the gemstone in the center of the hilt shone with a new vigor. Puer Aeternus opened their eyes. The sword in front of them was no longer the old broadsword they had dragged in. It was a new creation, one charged with the raw essence of light. Stepping back, Puer Aeternus noticed another change. Their gaze turned downward to some broken glass on the floor, where they caught their own reflection. Sacrificing so much of their magic had aged them into a young adult. They had flowing gold locks and a sinewy, muscled form. Their ice-blue eyes shone a bit duller than before. Still, Puer Aeternus managed to lift the sword, thrusting it forward. It was perfect. They just needed some armor and they were good to go. As Puer Aeternus left to fetch some armor from the Grotto stores, their mind wandered once more. This was something they should have done a long time ago. The past was long gone, but the future was in the former youth demigod's hands. Chapter 5. A Light in the Dark. Snotter swallowed back her groan. If there was anyone in Alterus more in love with the sound of his own voice. So, anyway, that's how I broke my wing. Yeah, great story. Shadowpaws trailed off. Even he was getting sick of this Valkyrie's rambling. Or maybe he was trying not to throw up from the gruesome story. Probably both. Saturn didn't get the cue. Hey, what else do you think is down here? So far, I found 2 blue crystals, some gold coins, and some really cool glow fungi. Snotter whipped back around to face him. Shh! Would you keep it down? You're gonna cause a cave-in. She was bluffing. Even if his incessant babbling did trigger a cave-in, Terra would be able to cleave through the rocks and get them out of there. She just didn't want to listen to this Valkyrie's ramblings anymore. Oh, don't worry about that, Snotter. These tunnels look pretty sound to me. I've been in worse. Dang it, Saturn. Can't you ever take a hint? Snotter silently grumbled to herself. This was going to be a long trip. All of a sudden, Snotter had to shield her eyes. Coming from just up ahead was an intense, shimmering white and gold light. No, it couldn't be. A quick look down at Terra confirmed it. Its golden sheen was brighter than ever. Oh, thank Anima. I was wondering if you found us down here. Miss Frosty? What are you doing here? Where's Jack? Shadowpaws asked. He and the others went down to find Puer Aeternus. I told them I'd stay back and keep watch over Excalibur. While Shadowpaws and Frosty were conversing, Saturn drew close to the light fragment. He couldn't believe his eyes. He'd recovered many priceless artifacts in his few years as an explorer, but none were quite as ornate or priceless as the Fragment of Light itself. Even through all these years, the gemstone in the center still shone like a cloudless summer sky. Just imagine if he could dislodge it. No one back at the League of Exploration would ever make fun of him again. Broken wing or no broken wing. A sudden scraping noise snapped the others to attention. Looking over, the 3 saw that Saturn had both his hands clasped around the hilt of the sword and was trying to pull it out of the stone. Good luck with that. We tried that earlier and it didn't work, Frosty told him. Saturn stopped tugging on the sword for a second. We? Who are you talking about? Shadowpaws turned to Saturn. I think she's talking about Jack, Kirami, Buckthorn, and San. They must not have had much luck either. Shadowpaws sighed. No, we didn't. Well, at least you can get Puer Aeternus and get them to get Excalibur out of here, right? Saturn perked up, hopeful. Doubtful. Snotter scoffed. Ran off sobbing like a baby when I told them that this grotto was abandoned. That's why we're not with the others. Kirami gave me a big earful about it, just 'cause I said the obvious out loud. Shadowpaws wanted to point out that Snotter's attitude was the reason why Kirami told her off, but he thought it was a better idea to keep his mouth shut. He grunted to himself, rolling his eyes. Meanwhile, Saturn had turned his attention back to Excalibur. Once again he pulled on it. He wiggled it around, trying to widen the cavity it was lodged in. At first it seemed like he was getting nowhere, but little by little, the rock's tight grip on the sword loosened. Tiny scratching and scuffing noises met his ears as the light fragment budged ever so slightly. Soon, he found that the rock was only barely holding on to Excalibur. With one mighty final tug, Saturn was sent flying backwards. He crashed to the ground, stunned for only a few milliseconds before his vision came back into focus. He lay on his back in the middle of the floor, and in his hands was the golden hilt of Excalibur. The silvery blade stuck straight up, the tip gleaming in the low light. Saturn had done it. He'd freed the sword from the stone. How... Frosty swallowed. "How could you do that when we couldn't?" she yelled, her voice a mix of amazement and pent-up frustration. Saturn jumped back. I'm not sure. It just came out by itself." Frosty paused. "I guess San was right. It could only be extracted by one of the light element." Saturn beamed. "Wow, I guess this means I'm the legendary champion of light, huh? Wait till I tell my friends about this." Whoa, slow down there," Snotter interjected, blocking his path. "This isn't a joke. We need that thing." Saturn was about to protest, but then he saw the broad axe in the snail's hand and the cannon in the Nekomata's. His face paled. He should have known earlier. Those were no ordinary weapons. Those were Terra and Lethal Joke. The earth and dark fragments. They had come for the Fragments of Anima. Are you part of the League of Exploration too?" he squeaked. He knew it was a stupid question to ask, but part of him still hoped that the rumors he'd heard weren't true. Snotter shook her head. How could this Valkyrie be the new champion of light? Saturn didn't even know how to wield Excalibur properly. He swung it around like a toy. He had no fighting experience. He had a broken, shrunken wing, and he didn't even want to be part of this fight. Was this really the best they could do? She didn't have time to ponder it too much. The air suddenly fell cold, the light from the fragments straining heavily against the sudden darkness. From the opposite corner of the room, Snotter could see twisted black forms rising up, looming above their heads. Glowing eyes and smoldering, fang-toothed mouths of many colors emerged from the black. The sounds of birds chirping from outside were replaced by the menacing growls of a pack of wendigos. The shadow demons bore their sharp teeth at them. They had been spotted. Chapter 6. Shining Hope. "Gangway!" The warning couldn't come soon enough. A blackened tentacle just missed Frosty as she jumped out of the way. She shot a beam of ice from her hands at it, freezing it to the ground. The wendigo it was attached to screeched in frustration. Shadowpaws and Snotter were struggling just as much as she was. They ducked and dove, Snotter slashing at wendigo tendrils with Terra, while Shadowpaws fired Lethal Joke's grenades directly at the shadowy blobs. They exploded on impact, sending clouds of laughing gas straight into their faces. The greenish gas might have slowed them down, but it didn't stop them. The three fairies panted from exertion. Meanwhile, Saturn ducked close to the ground, Excalibur still clasped in his hand. What can I do? What can I do? He'd never actually wielded a sword before. He didn't really know much about magic at all. How could he stand a chance against these creatures? All of a sudden, he spotted something in the corner of his eye. Excalibur had started glowing gold. Clearly it was charging up to do something, but what? Well, he wouldn't wait long to find out. A lone wendigo spotted him, sending out a swift-moving tentacle to snare him. Saturn swung Excalibur on pure instinct. He waited for the sensation of an icky tendril wrapping around his body, sucking his anima out. Except it never came. Instead, he heard the clean sound of steel cutting air and an agonized shriek coming from above. He opened his eyes and saw that the tendril had been sliced into many pieces and now lay scattered across the ground. Looking back to Excalibur, he could see a golden aura around it, jagged and sharp as a blade. He smiled as a wild idea gripped his mind. "Hey, you!" he yelled to the wendigos. "You want this? Come and get it!" He brandished Excalibur at the wendigos. Every one of the wendigos turned and gave chase. Excalibur's glow grew hotter as they approached. Just moments before impact, Saturn swung the sword once more. It launched a crescent-shaped blade of light towards the attackers. More shrieks filled Saturn's ears as the blade sliced through the wendigos like butter. He swung again and again, more blades of light coming from Excalibur. Though his swings were clumsy, the light blade sliced and diced his attackers, reducing them to scattered lumps across the ground. The pieces crawled towards each other, trying to reconnect. Frosty spotted a few and froze them in place. Snotter and Shadowpaws followed her lead, hacking and blasting the remaining pieces into even smaller ones to keep the wendigos from reforming. Eventually, the battleground was covered in ice and frozen chunks of shadow demons. Saturn noticed Excalibur's glow had changed. The glow had taken on a sky blue shade and had moved from the blade to the center gemstone. Eh? What's this? Excalibur's charging a new spell? Only one thing to do now. Saturn turned Excalibur's blade towards the ground, gently pushing its tip into the ice. The blue glow from the gem encased the ground, filling the chamber. When it cut out, the world had returned to normal. The wendigos, the ice, and the laughing gas were gone. The chamber looked as it did before, with no sign that any one of the foul creatures had ever been there. Saturn stared straight ahead in disbelief. What had just happened? Had he really just done what he thought he did? Wow, I guess I kinda misjudged you. Saturn turned around to find Snotter behind him, rubbing her neck uneasily. Shadowpaws took his place beside her. He looked just as haggard as she did. In fact, all three of them looked as though they had been through the ringer. None of them seemed seriously hurt, though. They were all drenched in sweat and covered in bumps and scrapes, but otherwise they were all right. Saturn turned his glance back to the sword in his hand. The sky blue glow around the gemstone was gone, replaced by a soft golden light around Excalibur's form. He still couldn't believe it. He had no experience fighting, all he did was swing it around a bit. But the fragment of light appeared to have its own sentience, its own thought pattern. It knew when its wielder needed help. It knew when to summon the light blades that Saturn used to tear the wendigos into ribbons. Clutching it in his right hand, he could feel waves of warmth cascading down his arm. Even now it was healing his wounds. Saturn looked over to Snotter to see that Terra was doing the same thing. Snotter stood still as the broad axe woven from Yggdrasil's branches flashed its trademark leaf green. It slithered over the forms of Frosty, Shadowpaws, and Snotter, healing their wounds. It seemed like Excalibur wasn't the only fragment of anima that could think. Huh, looks like Kirami was right after all. Frosty's voice broke the silence. Kirami? Saturn inquired. All of a sudden, Frosty remembered. Ah, the others! They're still down there! We need to go find them! Where did they go? Did they go to find more treasure? Would you stop rattling on about treasure? Snotter snapped. Saturn jumped back, his one good wing flaring out. Speaking of causing a cave-in, Shadowpaws smirked. Now is not the time, Frosty Whisper shouted. She turned and ran towards the exit on the opposite side of the chamber. Shadowpaws and Snotter made their way after her through the tunnel. Saturn hesitated for a few seconds before Snotter turned around and grabbed him by his wrist, hauling him into the tunnel. Haha, looks like you've taken a liking to me after all. Shut up. That's not why you're coming with us. We need the light fragment, and you're the only one who seems to know how it works. Saturn couldn't see where they were going, but the lights from Terra and Excalibur guided their way. Their glow had changed again. Shades of gold and yellow had faded to the green and violet of their elements, and the lights were pulsing steadily, their speed growing with every step. As their magical heartbeat quickened, the tunnel grew darker, until only the lights in front of him and Snotter's pull on his arm guided Saturn's way. Saturn gulped. What had he gotten himself into? Chapter 7. A Blackened Heart. San shook his head to clear it. He couldn't believe how big the tunnel system under the Forest of the Young really was. Since he and the crew left Excalibur's chamber, They had spent hours winding through a seemingly endless maze. It was just the same routine of crawl through tunnel, encounter wendigo, banish wendigo, and keep walking. He could swear that they were just going in circles. The Tengu's legs ached. How he wished to spread his wings and fly over this labyrinth. Alas, he had no such option. He was underground and his sight was getting worse by the minute. He let his mind wander. His thoughts drifted to Puer Aeternus. He had been so selfish all those years, running away to the Razorfrost range when one of his friends was suffering like this, pointlessly sweeping up broken glass and praying at crumbled altars, having returned home, but still so lost. San grimaced. Just like I failed Strombolio. He remembered how he'd reacted when he saw Strombolio with that bottle of Amberjack cider. Strombolio had always been the jokester of the group. No matter what they were going through, he could always count on the Harlequin gremlin to lighten up the mood. It didn't matter that he was sore or tired or hungry whenever Strombolio was around. To see him in that state, drinking away his sorrows. San remembered what he'd said to Strombolio when they'd had that little talk just a half a year ago. Looks like I'll be having that conversation with Puer Aeternus too. It would be alright. He would just talk to Puer Aeternus and that would be the end of it. He could get them to pull the sword out, get them to leave the grotto. Maybe he could even get in touch with Altaria after this and see if she would take him in. San was sure that Altaria was lonely after Kirami's farewell. San's thoughts were interrupted when a familiar blue figure suddenly came into view. Frosty skidded to a stop in front of Jack Thunder, her face illuminated with Stormbringer's green light. "Ah!" she yelped in surprise. "Oh, Jackie, there you are. I was worried sick about you." "Yay, try and bowl me over, will ya?" Jack Thunder's expression changed from irritation to recognition when he saw who it was. "Oh, Frosty, I didn't see that was you. Are you okay? Did you get hurt?" "I'm fine, Frosty," he snorted. "We're all fine. Sick of walking, but fine." Shadowpaw stepped forward. "Good news, everyone. We got ourselves a new fragment and a new wielder." Right on cue, Jack Thunder could hear thumping noises and someone cursing from behind the Nekomata. Frosty and Shadowpaw stepped out of the way to reveal Snotter still dragging Saturn by the arm. "Ow, ow, ow! Okay, I get it. No more talking about treasure." Saturn's complaint stopped when he felt Snotter let go of his wrist. He turned his gaze to face the four strange fairies in front of him. He smiled awkwardly. "Hi, my name's Saturn. Guess that was kind of a bad first impression, wasn't it?" "Don't worry about it," Buckthorn addressed him. "What matters is that you're here. And that you got Excalibur. How did you get it out of there anyway?" Jack Thunder piped up. Saturn shrugged. "I just kinda wiggled it around until it was loose enough to pull out." Suddenly the lights from the 6 anima fragments dimmed. A heavy blackness settled over the crew as they huddled closer together. It was happening again, but where was it coming from? Jack Thunder turned and spotted an entryway he hadn't seen before. He could sense a nasty, evil magic emanating from within. Looking closer, he could spot a tall figure staring into a dull, colorless pond. Puer Aeternus. The Light Champion was in danger. The Storm Gremlin motioned to the crew to follow him. They each made their way through the cursed doorway, only the Fragments of Anima providing any sort of protection from what lay inside. The chamber was deathly silent. Not even the lapping of water from the pool could be heard. In fact, one could mistake it for a monochrome painting if it weren't for the subtle movement of both the water and the figure sitting right in front of it. San approached nervously. "Puer Aeternus?" No response. Puer Aeternus stared intently at the water. "We're sorry for disturbing you. We just came here to see if you are all right," Kirami added. Still no response. "Come on, please say something. You're scaring us," Shadowpaws implored. The fell energy around Puer Aeternus grew stronger. Jack Thunder and Snotter drew their fragments, ready to fight. Sparks flew around Razor's mouth. Look, Puer, I didn't mean what I said earlier. I just didn't get it, alright? Your grotto is very important to you. I see that now. Snotter clasped onto Terra tightly. Guys? I don't think Puer Aeternus wants to talk right now. Saturn stammered. Puer Aeternus' breathing had become ragged, their body stiff. They refused to look up, but Saturn caught the new demigod's expression slowly shifting in the water, starting at despondence, shifting to irritation, and then pure rage. What did I tell you? Jack Thunder staggered back. It was that tone again. That same tone he'd heard with Sour Apple back in Yggdrasil's Grove. All signs of warmth or softness were gone from Puer Aeternus' voice, replaced with loathing and anger. Looking down into the pond, he noticed something else about Puer Aeternus' face. The Light Champion's mouth was dripping with a disgusting ink-like substance. He should have known. The oppressive darkness, the vile vibe he got from this place, the hostility from Puer Aeternus, and now this. There was no question about it. Puer Aeternus had fallen. In their place was a sullen, broken, wendigo-infested shell. The former wielder of Excalibur whipped around to face the crew, their face still a mask of fury. What did I tell you? San ran to the youth demigod's side, trying to calm them. Please, Puer Aeternus, it's us. We're trying to help you. Help me! Puer Aeternus roared. You come into my grotto, defile every inch of it, steal the light fragment, and then you have the nerve to tell me that you care? San yelped as Puer Aeternus wrestled themselves from his grasp. Their angry glance turned towards the kid heroes. They screamed and recoiled as soon as they saw the glow from the Fragments of Anima. A glow that was pulsing at 100 miles a minute now. You! Dragging your filth into my grotto! You're going to pay! Puer Aeternus screamed as they lunged at the crew. Interlude 2. Raining Sunshine. Puer Aeternus skidded to a stop on the pavement. The blackened monster before them whipped around, leering over the youth demigod with lightning crackling between its teeth. More wendigos swarmed the skies, circling the two like vultures. Bolts of reddish lightning lanced between them as they turned blue skies into a swirling black storm, the same lightning that lined the attacker's mouth. Puer Aeternus knew where it had learned that. The team had been called to Cyclone City. The metropolis in the sky was home to many air elementals, mostly storm gremlins. Storm gremlins that those demons drained and stole their weather control abilities from. They were using their magic to strengthen the endless tornado that kept Cyclone City aloft, threatening to tear the continent apart. The wind was already beginning to take Puer Aeternus off their feet. The lightning inside the Wendigo's mouth grew brighter. Puer Aeternus braced for another strike of lightning when something small and round struck their attacker from the side. The projectile exploded, erupting into a shower of greenish gas. Hey, ugly, over here! Strombolio taunted the monster. He narrowly leapt out of the way as it directed a bolt of lightning at him. Haha, missed me! The Harlequin gremlin hopped from side to side, firing more laughing gas grenades at it. The Wendigo howled in anger as every one of its strikes missed its target. Seeing their comrade struggling, the Wendigos above stopped circling and dove in to help. Unfortunately, Strombolio didn't see them until it was too late. Ha ha ha! You couldn't hit the broadside of a... Yeah! He screamed as a bolt of that foul magic hit him directly in the stomach. It coursed through his body, horrible pain erupting throughout. He staggered and fell to his knees, drenched in sweat. Still, he snarled defiantly up at his attacker. Is that all you got? Alright, that's enough. Puer Aeternus charged up Excalibur. A ragged, sharp aura coursed around its blade, swinging it in the direction of the Wendigo that had struck Strombolio. A circular blade of light materialized. It flew straight at the Wendigo, tearing a clean cut in its form. It shrieked and dropped to the ground, frantically flopping around as it tried to piece itself back together. Puer Aeternus swung Excalibur again and again, cutting every Wendigo into little pieces. Beside them, Strombolio got up on one knee, firing lethal joke with one hand while clutching his abdomen in the other. He grimaced and winced, tears pricking the corners of his eyes, but he managed to strike the Wendigos whenever they got too close to Puer Aeternus, slowing them down enough for the youth demigod to deal with them. Eventually, the skies cleared. Wendigos were scattered across the ground, flopping about. All of a sudden, Excalibur's glow changed to sky blue. Plunging the sword downward, Puer Aeternus enveloped the battlefield in soft light. All the Wendigos disappeared as the sword worked its magic. When it finally cut out, not even a speck of black Wendigo mass could be seen. Strombolio groaned. Puer Aeternus ran to his side. He was still clutching his stomach. That cursed bolt of lightning must have really hurt him. Here, this might help. The blue light from Excalibur enveloped Strombolio's form. Gradually his expression softened. The pain seemed to be letting up. He let out a deep sigh as the spell finished channeling. Thanks, Puer. Puer Aeternus helped Strombolio amble back to their campsite, bracing him on one shoulder. He had gotten nasty knoll magic poisoning. Later that night, Alteria of Foxfire used her fire katana Yuuki to burn away Strombolio's disease. Even so, he was left with a permanent scar across his belly, one that branched and forked, just like the bolt of lightning that had struck him. That scar became the subject of many songs after the war, songs that told the story of how the great Strombolio took a bolt of lightning to the gut and just laughed it all off. Strombolio himself sang many of those songs at the various parties and celebrations he was invited to in the wake of the war. It was a dark time in Alteris, a time when everyone needed a little piece of the Harlequin Gremlin's indomitable resilience and optimism. And he wouldn't deny that to them, not in a million years. But he would always remember how Puer Aeternus helped him in his hour of need. Chapter 8. We Are Legion. Puer Aeternus tripped and fell before they could even come within an arm's length of Jack Thunder. They slid across the ground, arms and legs encased in ice. Frosty hit them with her ice beam again, sticking them fast to the ground. Puer Aeternus screamed and cursed, trying to wriggle out of the ice's firm grasp. Their magic sparked uselessly around their frozen hands. Slowly, the 6 young heroes approached them. Jack Thunder pointed Stormbringer down at them, casting the undifferentiated healing spell he'd used on Wendigo victims before on the former Light Champion. Puer Aeternus froze for a second, but quickly returned to their struggling. Huh? What? Why isn't it working? This spell had always worked before, but somehow, the Wendigos infesting Puer Aeternus were able to overcome it. Not even Nemesis could resist the power of undifferentiated anima. He swallowed hard. If the Wendigos infesting Puer Aeternus were this powerful already, the youth demigod must have suffered for a long time. Jack Thunder cast the healing spell once again. Maybe it just needed a bit more power. Once again, Puer Aeternus paused for a second, then went back to struggling. Dang, they just won't quit! Buckthorn quickly caught on to what Jack Thunder was doing. She joined in casting the healing spell the next time around. Puer Aeternus paused for longer this time, their face holding an expression of bewilderment for a split second. Well, that was a step in the right direction. Shadowpaws, Snodder, and Kirami each joined in, channeling the healing spell with Jack Thunder and Buckthorn. As the spell grew stronger, the period of time that Puer Aeternus seemed lucid grew, and their face curled more and more in disgust. Their body was threatening to reject their unwanted guests, and they could feel it. But the Wendigos still weren't coming out. Jack Thunder got tired and sat down. Saturn, he addressed the Valkyrie. We're getting closer. We just need a bit more power. You know how to use undifferentiated anima, don't you? I don't know. Don't worry, it's easy to use. Just think about us and your family and gently channel your magic. Saturn nodded reluctantly. He took his place at the storm gremlin's side. Okay, on my count. 1, 2, 3, Jack Thunder instructed. The 6 of them all cast the spell at the same time. Puer Aeternus completely stopped moving. A sense of calm washed over them as the spell took hold. And it seemed to be the ticket. Puer Aeternus began to retch on the floor, gouts of black wendigo mass bursting from their mouth. Jack Thunder and his crew jumped back as the black ink spread across the ground, threatening to spill on their feet. The black gunk continued to spread, coating the ground and spilling into the pool. Jack Thunder reeled back in shock. The sheer amount of it was horrid, more than he'd ever seen from any wendigo victim thus far. He and his teammates hopped up on rocks, but the substance continued to rise. Razor jumped on Jack Thunder's shoulder, snarling at the muck. By the time it stopped, the whole cave was bathed in a sea of null magic. Puer Aeternus had thankfully managed to come unstuck from the ground. They sat up in a pool of ink, their expression somewhere between confusion and disgust. Frosty and Sun had also hopped up onto rocks. The latter perched on a high rock, poised to strike. A chill passed over the crew as the inky pool beneath their feet began to bubble and boil. The underground pond had turned into a river of ice-cold magma. The tide rose, liquid arms thrashing about and threatening to pull the young heroes under. Jack Thunder heard a cry to his left and looked over. The hands had already grabbed hold of Puer Aeternus and were beginning to drag them under. The chamber lit up with green light for a second as a bolt of lightning sliced through the air. The arms around Puer Aeternus immediately dissolved and fell back into the bubbling, writhing maelstrom as Jack Thunder's lightning bolt incinerated them. Puer Aeternus spotted a nearby fallen statue and leapt on top of it, shaking. Out of the darkness, a sea of glowing white eyes emerged, staring straight at the storm gremlin. They did not appreciate being foiled. Jack Thunder pointed Stormbringer at them, prepared to strike if they made any move for him. The wendigos pounced, enveloping the meddler who had distracted them. The glow from Stormbringer faded as the wendigos began to drain his magic. Jack Thunder screamed and fought, tearing at the demon's forms with his teeth. All of a sudden, he felt himself tossed like a rag doll as a gushing cascade of water knocked him to the side. He hit his back against the wall and slumped to the ground. That wave had knocked the wind out of him, but freed him from the wendigo's grasp. His gaze turned upwards to see Buckthorn, the sea stone flashing a deep blue around her neck. He stood up and ran to her side. They were surrounded. Wendigos were everywhere, blanketing the floor, crawling up the walls, approaching the ceiling. There was no escape from them. The only light came from the fragments, which were dangerously close to being consumed. Flashes of fire and blades of light could be seen as Kirami, Snodder, and Saturn used their weapons to cut down the arms that reached for them and their friends. Shadowpaws fired lethal joke into the fray, slowing down their attackers only slightly. The laughing gas didn't stand a chance as the wendigos swallowed it whole. A harsh crackle sounded as something black and red lanced over the heads of Jack Thunder and Buckthorn. It crashed into the wall behind them, leaving a smoldering crater in its wake. Their heads jerked right to the source of the energy blast. Out of the chaos, one wendigo stared right at them, mouth crackling with false electricity. Jack Thunder growled when he realized what had happened. They had learned to use lightning spells by stealing his magic. He was about to electrocute the offender when more bolts of lightning flew over his head. He, Buckthorn, and Puer Aeternus were forced to take cover. Overhead, they could faintly see San flying in a random pattern, trying to throw the wendigos off. The walls cracked and began to crumble as the lightning hit them. Too much more of this, and the chamber would collapse right in on itself. What could they do? Chapter 9: Parting the Sea. Saturn paused only for a split second before resuming his onslaught. At this point, he was just swinging blindly into the void. He could see nothing except for the faint lights of each of the fragments. The wendigos even filled the air. Droplets of black ink swirled like volcanic ash in front of his face, making it impossible to see anything. The Valkyrie collapsed, getting down on one knee. He looked over to Excalibur. "Well, whatever you're planning, we could really use it right now." That's when he noticed the glow around the sword began to change. From its golden yellow, it turned the whitest of whites. As its gleam grew brighter, the surrounding storm calmed. It still raged all around, but it seemed to avoid him as if he were standing in the eye of a hurricane. Saturn hopped off the rock he stood on. The Wendigo sea parted around his feet, exposing the rocky ground below. Excalibur was using its magic to repel the Wendigos. He could walk freely now. He called out for the others. Guys, where are you?" "Saturn, you're okay," Buckthorn exclaimed. "Yeah, Excalibur's protecting me. Come over here." As soon as she, Jack Thunder, and Puer Aeternus stepped under Excalibur's protection, something strange happened. Stormbringer and the Sea Stone began to glow a bright white as well. A sudden blast blew the Wendigos back from the floor, and the area of exposed dirt around their feet grew. Saturn could faintly see shades of yellow, sky blue, and indigo shimmering off of Excalibur's blade. Jack Thunder's heart leapt into his throat when he saw the gleam coming off his staff. He realized something. The Fragments of Anima were very powerful artifacts on their own, but their real strength shone through when they came together. Just like him and the friends he'd met along the way. He and the others waded through the storm as they called out for the others. They found Shadowpaws first, followed by Snotter and Kirami. One by one, the Fragments of Anima glowed the same white, and another color was added to their spectral aura. As Kirami joined their side, the sea of Wendigos erupted all around them. They screeched in rage as they dove straight for the team, but an invisible force blew all of them back, splattering them against the walls of the chamber. Observing the lull in the chaos, San landed beside Jack Thunder. The Tengu puffed and gasped for air. Jack Thunder could see that some of his flight feathers had been singed too. Frosty fared little better. She looked as though she were about to pass out from exertion. Even so, she took her place at San's side. The blizzard had finally abated. The chamber was still dark, but now the 8 of them could make out its basic structure. The pond, the columns, even the Wendigos still splattered on the walls were visible. An eerie stillness washed over the room. No one dared make the first move. Finally, someone did. A smaller Wendigo managed to wrench itself from the wall, glowering at them. Before it could do anything, Saturn swung Excalibur. A blade of light sliced through the Wendigo, cutting it in half. Its form slumped to the floor, not to get up again. Another Wendigo approached from the back. With one swing of her katana, Kirami incinerated it. The smell of smoky ash and triple-grilled Wendigo Deluxe filled the room. Its companion roared in anger, and Shadowpaws launched a grenade into its mouth. The Shadow Demon exploded, sending a shower of Wendigo substance and laughing gas down onto the team. Shadowpaws wiped the foul black liquid off his face with the back of his paw. Even in this state, the Wendigos would just not give up. The team stood ready, picking off the Wendigos one by one as they approached. Not that they exactly needed to. Those monsters couldn't even come close to them without getting hurt. Eventually, the last Wendigo whimpered and dissolved onto the floor. Jack Thunder could only stare blankly. Was this all a dream? Just minutes ago, he and Buckthorn had been down in the trenches trying to figure out what to do. Wendigos surrounded them on all sides. But then Saturn showed up with Excalibur. The sword had shielded them all from the growing storm. Once again, despite all odds, they had outlasted their attackers. He looked over to the Valkyrie. Saturn met his eyes and smiled. The Storm Gremlin returned his smile. He had only known Saturn for a few minutes, but Jack Thunder could tell he was a true friend. Their peaceful moment didn't last long. The ground splatter in front of them suddenly began to bubble. Out of it rose a wendigo much bigger than the others, with protrusions like stag horns emerging from its form. It glowered down at them. "You!" Its voice was frantic and exhausted. "You've been a thorn in our side for more than long enough." "I could say the same for you," Jack Thunder shouted back. "Every single time, Storm Gremlin. Every single time. We should be the ones feasting on your magic, but just when we are about to take a bite, you dash the cup from our hands. Defeat us with our own food. How could this be?" The wendigo screeched. "That's kind of what we're here for. What makes you think you deserve our anima anyway?" "Deserve? Who taught you anything about that, Storm Gremlin? There is no deserve in our land. Just eat or be eaten. Now stand still while I destroy you!" A fresh surge of anger filled Jack Thunder's body. There was no reasoning with this beast. He readied Stormbringer as lightning crackled between the wendigo's teeth. Jack Thunder heard a screech as something tackled the wendigo to the ground. He and his friends scattered. The wendigo thrashed about, trapped in the center of all the young heroes and their anima fragments. And standing on its back was... Nemesis? "Ah, sorry I can't help you more, Jack. Just cast the spell." The former wendigo general struggled to stay on top as its quarry flailed. "What? What are you doing?" Snotter shouted. "Aren't you supposed to be trying to kill us right now?" "No time for that. Cast the spell." "Hold it. How do we know that this isn't some sort of trick?" Shadowpaws asked. "Cast the spell!" The wendigo on the bottom had nearly loosened Nemesis from its back. Jack Thunder didn't exactly have a lot of time left to consider if this was one of Nemesis's tricks. He nodded towards the others. They pointed the fragments of anima towards the two wendigos as they chanted, "Back to the flip side with you and your hate. You have no place in this land of dreams. We belong to Alterus. Alterus is ours. Now be gone." And just like all the times before, bright white light enveloped the entire room as the fragments did their work. Through the din, one could faintly make out the black puddles evaporating, swept up by the light. All at once, the light rushed out of the chamber through the archway from which they came. Only a few seconds later, a distant explosion shook the chamber. A soft glow coming from various lamps hanging throughout filled the room. It was over. Chapter 10. On Angel's Wings. San began to sway back and forth. He collapsed to his knees beside Jack Thunder. "Mr. San, are you alright?" he shouted. I'm alright. He fell face first into the dirt. "Mr. San!" The crew surrounded him. Jack Thunder picked his head up off the ground. "Don't do this to us!" "What do you mean?" The Tengu smiled tiredly. Then he realized. "Oh, don't worry. I'm just exhausted." He planted his face in the dirt once more. The crew reeled back in shock. Don't worry, I can help. I think I know something for this. Let's see. Chamomile, coca bark, what am I missing?" Buckthorn rifled through her bag for potion ingredients. Her frantic babbling and searching only ceased when she noticed San's form. He wasn't dying. He had curled up on the ground and was now snoring away. The 6 young heroes giggled a little bit, both from relief and from the amusing sight before them. Jack Thunder scratched San's head feathers behind his right ear. "Wow, Mr. San, you gave us all a pretty good scare there." San's ear twitched a little as the feathers on his head stood up, making him look fluffier than normal. He cooed like a pigeon, stretching before settling once more. "Alright, this is very cute and all, but we need to get out of here. I don't trust this place not to cave in after all the damage those wendigos did to them." Frosty interrupted. She was right. The walls were crumbling and so full of cracks that it was a miracle they hadn't already collapsed in on themselves. "Come on, let's go." She directed the young heroes and a trembling Puer Aeternus to the chamber's exit. She made her way back to San's sleeping form. "Alright, I get it. You're tired. You can rest once we get to the surface. San didn't move. Frosty poked him a little. Come on, we need to go. I'm not carrying you back up there. Still no response. San just kept snoring. Frosty let out an exasperated sigh as she slung San over her shoulder. Okay, I guess I am carrying you out after all. He still didn't wake up as they made their way out of the tunnels together. San stirred. A fresh, cool breeze washed over the Tengu as he stretched out his wings. That was the best sleep he'd had in a long time. He idly wondered where he was as his eyes fluttered open. He got his answer. A deep blue and purple sky and the silhouettes of treetops met his eyes. I'm in the middle of a forest? How did I get here? San worked himself into a sitting position. He was in the Forest of the Young. Now he remembered. That must have been one heck of a battle to knock him out like that. So much so that he didn't even wake up when he was hauled out of there. At least, he thought someone carried him out of there. They had to. He couldn't have just walked out of there in his sleep, could he? I see you're awake. San glanced around for the source of the voice. He noticed Frosty sitting beside him. The 6 kid heroes were sitting beside her on the hill, chattering about their lives and how they met each other. How are you feeling? Must have been pretty worn out to sleep all the way to the surface. I had to carry you out of there. You wouldn't wake up. Oh, thank you. San's face flushed. Don't worry about it. Anima knows we're all as tired as you are. Frosty cast her gaze down to the ground. The two sat in silence for some time. San listened to the conversation from the 6 young heroes beside him. They were awfully energetic considering what they'd been through just hours before. For a second, San wished that he could switch places with them. Their seemingly endless energy was just what he needed right now. He wasn't sure he'd even have the strength to make it through the final battle. That's when he remembered. There was one more thing he wanted to do before he and the others left the Forest of the Young. Is Puer Aeternus around here? Puer Aeternus poked their head out from behind one of the trees. I'm right here, San. San got on his feet and walked over to Puer Aeternus. He nodded towards Frosty, as if to say, I'll be back in a minute. The two of them disappeared behind a tree. Puer Aeternus cringed, wringing their hands. They didn't know why San wanted to speak with them in private, but they knew it couldn't be anything good. San took a deep breath. Here goes. Puer Aeternus, please look at me. Puer Aeternus flinched at San's tone. San softened his voice. I'm not mad at you. I just want to talk. The former Light Champions slowly turned their gaze to face San. About what? The Tengu sighed. After the war, I fled into the Razorfrost Range. I didn't want to be part of the world anymore. Puer Aeternus' expression morphed into one of confusion. I went there wanting to hide for the rest of my life. It was only when I saw the signs of the Heart of Darkness's return that I decided to leave that infernal place. It's obvious that you're very attached to the Grotto, but the Cult of Youth is gone. I've been a lot better since I left the Razorfrost Range, and I think that you'll be better off if you leave this place too. But, Puer Aeternus stammered, where else is there for me to go? Altaria of Foxfire needs a new traveling partner. Kirami used to travel with her, San answered, motioning to the young kitsune. She was still chatting with the others, Yuuki sitting on the ground beside her. But since she joined us, I'm sure Altaria would be happy to have you by her side. Puer Aeternus' gaze dropped. They thought about it. Finally, they looked up and nodded. I'll try and talk to her after this, but I don't want you staying in this place alone anymore. There are people out there who need you, Puer Aeternus. The youth demigod stood silently. Come on. San directed Puer Aeternus back to the hillside where they were before. You don't have to worry about it right now. We've got a lot to celebrate. The two of them silently trudged back. Chapter 11 Spring Celebration. Tempest Island was not a friendly place when the sun went down. Spring thunderstorms enveloped the island in a velvet blanket, the only light coming from flashes of lightning in all colors of the rainbow and the slowly setting sun in the distance. But on this particular night, one solitary hut in the Storm Gremlin village buzzed with activity. Jack Thunder had begun his quest almost a year ago when he found Stormbringer inside Mount Tempest. Now, with the help of Buckthorn, Shadowpaws, Snotter, Kirami, Saturn, and of course Frosty and San, he had found all 6 of the Fragments of Anima. Now, he and his crew had everything they needed to make their final push against the Heart of Darkness. The Storm Gremlin knew that it was far from over. He knew that in the coming days, he and his friends would face their biggest challenge yet. But for now, they could all relax and have fun. Snotter, Shadowpaws, and Kirami were sitting at the table, playing a card game. Snotter seemed to be winning, but Kirami clearly had something up her sleeve. Beside them, Buckthorn and Saturn chatted with them. The Reef Siren talked about her life in the Great Barrier Kingdom and all that she'd learned about medicine from her mother, while Saturn listened intently. For someone with so much energy and so many words, he seemed really fascinated with what Buckthorn had to say. Jack Thunder stole a glance at the Valkyrie's crooked, withered wing. Maybe that had something to do with it. "What's wrong, Jackie? You're not joining in?" Jack Thunder turned to see Frosty standing behind him. He sighed. "I'm just tired. It's been a long day." Frosty sat down next to him. "You're thinking about what comes after this, aren't you?" "Yeah, how did you guess?" "Just a feeling. I'm thinking about the same thing." She took a deep breath. "Where's Mr. San?" The Tengu had given the crew quite the fright when he just collapsed after their battle. "He's fine. He went straight to bed," Frosty replied. Jack Thunder smiled. Bed did sound nice right now. "Hey Jack, you want to come and play with us?" Snotter called out to the Storm Gremlin. "I'm about to mop the floor with Kirami." "Not so fast." Kirami set down a card in her hand. It bore the image of a king bearing her sword. "Gah, you got me again. That's it. You're going down this next round." Snotter gathered all the cards and shuffled them once again. No matter how many rounds they played, she couldn't seem to get the better of Kirami. The Kitsune had beat her every single time. Still, it looked like a lot of fun. Jack Thunder took his seat next to Shadowpaws. Once more, the fairy snail handed out cards to the 4 of them. Jack Thunder smiled as he looked over his hand. Oh yeah, it was on. Jack Thunder stared up at the ceiling above. It had been a very fun night. He couldn't count how many times he'd lost to Kirami. That fox just seemed to have the best luck when it came to card games. Poor Snotter would never give up as long as she continued to lose, and Kirami just wouldn't let her. They had played about 8 times before Jack Thunder decided to throw in the towel. The Storm Gremlin smiled to himself. They would need all the tenacity they could for their final stand. Their last battle flashed before his eyes. The wendigos had sure gone all out this time. They had actually managed to latch onto him and suck out some of his anima. If Saturn hadn't shown up when he did... Jack Thunder heard a soft chirp beside him. Turning his head, he saw Razor. The little weather wyvern gave him a worried look and licked his cheek. "Don't worry, Razor. I've just got a lot on my mind right now." He stroked Razor's head. The weather wyvern climbed onto Jack Thunder's chest and lay down. Jack Thunder's gaze turned back to the ceiling. His mind trailed to Alteria's spellbook. He still wasn't sure if it would work, but he remembered their conversation on the precipice of Mount Inferno. Heaven's Transformation? That's a very powerful spell. Yeah, I know. Looks like a nightmare to use, too. Magic that powerful usually is. The question is, are you willing to take a chance on it? Jack Thunder rolled over onto his side. Razor rolled off his chest and stood up, making his way to the end of the Storm Gremlin's bed before curling up once more. Jack Thunder stared at the wall in front of him. watching the light from flashes of lightning dance across his line of vision. It would have lulled him to sleep if he could turn off his brain. A sudden blast of thunder made him bolt upright. He calmed down when he realized it was just the storm outside. He lay back down, sighing. Gah, thought that was a cannon for a second there. Jack Thunder's eyelids drooped, not so much from sleepiness as from fatigue. The most important part of his mission still lay before him, and he was already weary of it. How was he supposed to make the final push like this? How was he supposed to stand up to the heart of darkness when he couldn't even get to sleep? Jack Thunder got up from the bed and made his way to the kitchen. Whenever he was sick or upset, Frosty would always make him some herbal tea to make him feel better, and that was just what he needed right now. Setting the kettle on the stove, he measured out equal portions of dried chamomile and peppermint leaves. When the water was ready, he poured them over the herbs into his favorite mug. A few minutes later, the water had turned a shade of yellow. He took his mug over to the window in the front room just outside the kitchen. Frosty didn't like it when he took food outside the kitchen, but this was an emergency. He would be careful not to spill anything on the floor. It seemed to do the trick. With every sip, his thoughts cleared. His mind drifted to his parents. He was thankful his sister had always been there for him, no doubt. But if their parents had lived, what would they say to him? All his life, he had devoted himself to studying magic. He thought that if he could become a master wizard, he could save someone else from having to go through what he and his sister went through in the war. And maybe, somehow, that would make their mom and dad proud, wherever they were. He finished his final sip. He felt a lot better now. Putting his dishes in the sink, Jack Thunder made his way back to his room. No matter what, he would finish what he started. He would stand up to the heart of darkness with his friends by his side. He wouldn't let his parents' legacy go to waste. Jack Thunder fell asleep as soon as his head hit the pillow. The rain continued to pour outside. Chapter 12. The Sun Sets. Jack Thunder awoke to the light of a new day. He sighed in relief. He'd finally managed to get to sleep. Razor was curled up beside him, snoring softly. The last thing Jack Thunder wanted to do was get up. He rolled over onto his other side, knowing that as soon as he got out of bed, he had a big day ahead of him. He was going to try and locate the site of the Heart of Darkness's return. Once he did that, he and his friends could take the fight straight to it. Jack Thunder sat up. He threw off his covers and slid off the bed. He showered and got dressed, his mind empty and clear. A good sleep had done wonders for his mental state. After slipping on his jumpsuit, he made his way to the front room. It seemed like all his friends were up. They circled around the kitchen table, eating and talking. Buckthorn turned to face the storm gremlin. "Oh, good! We were waiting for you." "You were?" Jack Thunder sat down at the table. Shadowpaws nodded. "Mr. San was trying to help us find where the Heart of Darkness is gonna show," he explained. Jack Thunder turned to San. The Tengu was poring over a map of Alterus, scrying it for any sense of where their next mission would be. His eyes squinted in deep concentration as he clasped onto Stormbringer with both hands. All of a sudden, the air staff lit up. San's eyes widened as he froze, Stormbringer's blade still hovering above the map. Just below them was the far western continent of Demeria. Peering closer, he noticed that the gem in the center of the staff was hovering just above the northwestern part of the continent. He looked closer. World's Edge? He should have known. Of all the lands in Alterus, none were more devastated by the war than World's Edge. Once a beautiful and vibrant land, filled with clear flowing streams and meadows full of flowers, World's Edge had been destroyed, reduced to a barren lava plain with nothing but rocks, volcanoes, and scorched trees. The land was deemed completely uninhabitable. It was the perfect place for a lord of evil like the Heart of Darkness to be, at least if Jack Thunder's comic books were anything to go by. World's Edge? Shadowpaws parroted back to San. You mean we have to go into the land of death? And he thought that going into Mount Inferno was bad. No, there has to be another way. Snotter shook her head. Though she still tried to sound brash, her voice quivered in fear underneath. Are you sure that's where it is? Looks like, I'm afraid, Kirami answered for San. She knew the scrying spell. Altaria had used similar spells in their quest to find Yuuki all those years ago. If the spell says this is where the Heart of Darkness will be, then it must be so. When will it show up? Buckthorn asked San. Saturn sat next to her, anticipating the Tengu's answer. San craned his neck, staring into the gemstone in Stormbringer's center. The team waited with bated breath as he analyzed the swirling shades within the crystal. Finally, he had his answer. It should be around the end of April. Around my birthday? Jack Thunder couldn't believe it. His birthday was coming up soon, and he was going to spend it fighting the Heart of Darkness? Why couldn't it have been at any other time? But at the same time, part of him liked this a lot. This would give him and his friends ample time to prepare and enjoy the spring weather before they had to fight. It was already approaching the end of March. Soon, the land below would be bursting into blossom, the colors of spring painting the world in brilliant hues and filling the air with fresh, sweet smells. Jack Thunder's heart fell. He hoped it wouldn't be the last time it did. From its place in the flip side, the Heart of Darkness watched Jack Thunder and his friends huddle around the map. It couldn't believe what had just happened the day prior. It had sent out all its best wendigos on that mission. Those beasts had staged an all-out attack on the crew. It was the biggest they'd ever done. They'd made a blizzard so dense and impenetrable that they thought no one could get through it. They hadn't counted on the ingenuity of one certain Valkyrie that had joined the team only the day before. And then Nemesis betrayed them. The Heart's scowl deepened. The incompetent Wendigo had gone and done it again. Was it really that resentful? So much so that it would betray its own mission, even if it meant not getting the anima it so desperately wanted? It made no sense to the Heart of Darkness. Unless... Looking at Jack Thunder and his friends now, the Heart could see how close they were. Even though she'd only met Saturn the day before, that reef siren Buckthorn was talking to him like they were old friends. So were Shadowpaws and Kirami. The Heart thought Nekomata and Kitsune were enemies, yet these two weren't fighting at all. The Heart of Darkness's memory drifted back to the time before it was the Heart of Darkness. It remembered when it had first created Alterus. It loved its creation, and they loved it back. But over the years, the Heart had grown greedy. It began to favor those whose sacrifices it preferred. It just kept eating and consuming, letting the Wendigos in until it was in the situation it was in now. The Wendigos had promised it so much. Endless favor, worship. It had accepted their null magic into itself. And look where that led it. Always hungry, always miserable, despised by its own creation, trapped in this infernal plane. What would it take to become whole again? The Heart's gaze fell back on the crew. What was it thinking? Those kids would just seal it away again, just like the first heroes did. But then again, it remembered how it caught Jack Thunder reading about Heaven's transformation back on Mount Inferno. From the looks of it, the little storm gremlin wanted to try it out on the Heart of Darkness. Such foolishness. That storm gremlin didn't know the half of what he was dealing with. The Heart saw the searing anger in his eyes when its army stole his lightning powers. Imagine he'd gotten a glimpse of the real Heart of Darkness. Even he and his insipid friends would lose themselves to hate. Hate. Armies might not have been enough to tear those kids apart, but could they stand up to an attack from the inside? The Heart of Darkness began to formulate a plan. The veil between Alterus and the flip side was so thin now, thin enough that it could get inside the minds of each one of them. It would learn their secrets. It would prey on their fears, and it would get them to turn their backs on their mission. By the time the heart was done with them, it wouldn't matter to any of them if Alterus was destroyed. The Heart of Darkness didn't know that behind it, Nemesis stared into the viewing window into Alterus too. The former Wendigo general sighed deeply, letting itself disappear into the depths of the flip side. Only a red and gray cape with a high mantle remained.